The world of boxing has always thrived on spectacle. From Muhammad Ali's charisma to Mike Tyson's menace, from Floyd Mayweather's undefeated precision to Canelo Alvarez's dominance, boxing has always lived in the sweet spot where athletic excellence collides with raw entertainment. But in recent years, the sport has entered a strange new era. The lines between traditional prize fighters and social media stars have blurred, and the audience is torn between purists who demand authenticity and newer fans who crave fireworks, chaos, and viral moments. And standing at the very center of this collision course is Jake Paul, the YouTuber turned fighter, a man who divides opinion like no other. When whispers began circulating about a potential clash between Jake Paul and Gervonta "Tank" Davis, the undefeated knockout artist who has terrorized multiple divisions, the boxing world stopped, stared, and couldn't decide whether to laugh, cheer, or prepare popcorn for what could be one of the wildest nights in combat sports history. Jake Paul's rise is unlike anything the sport has seen before. Born in Ohio, he didn't grow up with dreams of Olympic gold or world titles. His stage was YouTube, Vine, and social media, where he built a massive following with stunts, pranks, and personality-driven content. But somewhere along the way, Paul discovered the allure of boxing. At first, the purists scoffed. How could a YouTuber possibly think he could compete in a sport where men have sacrificed their entire lives in the gym? But Paul leaned into the skepticism. He trained seriously, hired world-class coaches, built a team, and began knocking out fellow influencers and athletes. The critics said it wasn't real boxing. He responded by calling out MMA fighters, ex-champions, and eventually professional boxers. Each time he stepped into the ring, the audience grew, the doubters kept doubting, and yet Jake Paul kept winning enough to stay relevant. He may not be the most skilled boxer, but he has the power, the athleticism, and more importantly, the marketing genius to turn every fight into an event. Across the ring in this story stands Gervonta Davis, the complete opposite. Known as Tank, Davis grew up in Baltimore's tough streets, forged in hardship, polished through a deep amateur career, and groomed under the tutelage of Floyd Mayweather himself. He isn't just a fighter. He's a knockout machine, a man with terrifying power in both hands, who has flattened champions from super featherweight to lightweight. His record speaks for itself, an undefeated slate filled with highlight reel finishes that have left opponents crumpled on the canvas. Davis fights with controlled aggression, explosive combinations, and an aura of danger that few fighters in the world can match. He doesn't talk as much as others, but when he does, his words cut sharp. His fists, however, are his loudest statements. So how does a fight like Jake Paul versus Gervonta Davis even come to be? On paper, it sounds absurd. Paul, a cruiserweight-sized showman, hovering around 190 pounds, and Davis, a natural lightweight who fights around 135 pounds. The size discrepancy alone makes it almost cartoonish. But in today's boxing landscape, where crossover fights draw more headlines than sanctioned world title bouts, absurdity sells. The spark came when Jake Paul began claiming he could beat any fighter at any weight if given the time to prepare. He specifically mentioned Davis, mocking his size, suggesting that the Tank might be a monster at lightweight but would crumble against a bigger, stronger man like him. Davis, never one to back down, laughed off Paul's comments at first, but when the noise grew, when the fans started chanting for the fight, when the idea became viral on social media, Tank fired back. He told Paul he was nothing but a clown, a fake fighter who couldn't survive a single round with him. That was all it took. The seed was planted. The controversy caught fire instantly. Purists were outraged. How dare Jake Paul even utter Davis's name in the same sentence as his? How dare the sport entertain such a circus when legitimate contenders were waiting for their shot, but promoters smelled gold? Fans argued furiously online. And suddenly, what seemed like a joke began to take shape as a very real possibility. The press ran wild with the story. Jake Paul leaned into it, posting training clips, mocking Davis's size, declaring he would knock out Tank and shock the world. Davis, irritated but amused, fired back with short, sharp replies that only fueled the hype. As the idea snowballed, boxing legends were pulled into the conversation. Floyd Mayweather dismissed Paul entirely, calling him a YouTube kid who was playing games in a man's sport. Mike Tyson, on the other hand, smirked and said he respected Paul for daring to call out killers, even if it meant getting knocked out. Roy Jones Jr. laughed but admitted that Paul's size advantage couldn't be ignored entirely. Even Manny Pacquiao's camp was quoted saying Davis would dismantle Paul, but they acknowledged the money involved could make it happen. The sport was divided. Was this a mockery, or was this simply the next evolution of boxing as entertainment? The press conferences were a show in themselves. Jake Paul arrived in tailored suits, sunglasses on, walking with the swagger of a man who had already won the psychological battle. He spoke loud, taunting Davis, calling him Mini Tank, belittling his size, promising that he would be too big, too strong, too powerful. He told reporters that Davis might have beaten little guys at 135, but now he was stepping into the real world of heavy hitters, and that he was going to get crushed. Davis sat calmly, a silent storm brewing behind his eyes, occasionally smirking, occasionally snapping back with biting remarks. At one heated face-off, Paul leaned down to look Davis in the eyes, mocking his height, and Davis responded with a shove that nearly sparked a brawl before security stepped in. The headlines wrote themselves. Training camp footage only added to the drama. Jake Paul surrounded himself with former champions, sparring bigger men, lifting heavy, working tirelessly to refine his skills. His team released edited highlight reels of him knocking down sparring partners, claiming he was hitting harder than ever. Davis's camp, meanwhile, showed clips of him exploding on the pads, his speed and ferocity undeniable, the crack of leather on mitts echoing like gunshots. Analysts broke down the matchup endlessly. Could Davis's speed and power carry up against a much bigger man? Could Paul actually withstand the kind of firepower Tank brought every time he let his fists fly? Fight week arrived, and the anticipation was surreal. The weigh-in was electric. Jake Paul, towering and muscular, flexed for the cameras, grinning ear to ear. Davis, smaller but ripped, scowled, his aura menacing as ever. Fans booed, cheered, and screamed as the two men went forehead to chest in their final face-off, security once again holding them apart. Fight night. The arena was buzzing, a crowd that mixed hardcore boxing fans, curious onlookers, and casuals drawn in by the sheer spectacle. Celebrities filled the front rows. Cameras flashed as Jake Paul made his ring walk, theatrics in full swing, accompanied by pyrotechnics and booming music, his name lighting up the screens. The crowd booed and cheered in equal measure. Then came Davis, the air shifting as the knockout artist walked with quiet menace. No gimmicks, no smiles, just the cold stare of a man ready to do damage. The bell rang, and the tension was palpable. Round one began with Jake Paul trying to establish his jab, pumping it out to keep Davis at distance. His size was evident, longer reach, heavier frame, but Davis was patient, weaving under the punches, studying, calculating. The crowd roared every time Paul landed a jab, and gasped every time Davis lunged forward with explosive bursts. By the second round, Davis began finding his rhythm, slipping Paul's shots and darting in with lightning-fast hooks to the body. Paul tried to use his weight to smother, leaning on Davis, pushing him back, but the Tank was relentless. The middle rounds became a war of contrasting styles. Paul using his jab, his size, his awkward angles to frustrate Davis, and Davis responding with bursts of violence that reminded everyone why he was one of the most feared punchers in the sport. In round 4, Davis landed a vicious left uppercut that snapped Paul's head back and had the crowd on their feet. Paul survived, clinched, and even came back with a thudding right hand that drew gasps. It landed clean, and for a moment, the world wondered if Tank could really be hurt. But Davis shook it off, glaring, smiling, and pressing forward with even more intensity. By the later rounds, the pace quickened. Davis's combinations grew sharper, his timing impeccable. In round 7, he unleashed a brutal left hook to the liver, and Paul staggered, gasping for air, barely surviving the count. The arena erupted, fans sensing the end. Paul, bloodied but defiant, tried to fight back, swinging wild, desperate haymakers that either missed or bounced off Davis's guard. Then in round 8, Tank found the shot he had been hunting all night, a crushing straight left down the pipe that landed flush on Paul's chin. Paul crashed to the canvas, eyes glazed, the referee waving it off as Davis stood over him, arms raised, the arena in pandemonium. The post-fight reactions came fast. Jake Paul, to his credit, stood up after medical checks, admitting Davis was every bit the monster people said he was, but vowing he would return, stronger, wiser. Davis spoke little, simply declaring that this was what happens when clowns step into the ring with real fighters. Legends weighed in again. Mike Tyson said Paul had shown courage, but warned him that elite fighters are on another level. Floyd Mayweather smirked, saying he told the world this would happen. Social media exploded with memes, debates, and endless discussions about whether Paul had earned respect or simply embarrassed himself. In the end, Jake Paul versus Gervonta Davis wasn't just a fight, it was a cultural event. It was proof of how far boxing has evolved, for better or worse, into a world where spectacle and sport collide. Davis remained the knockout king, his aura untouched. Paul walked away battered but richer, more famous, and perhaps more respected than ever. And the fans? They got what they came for, a night of drama, chaos, and the kind of unforgettable theater that only boxing in its wildest forms can deliver.